This is an Immari, a space dwarf from Ravaged Star, the upcoming game from Lazy Square Games, Mini Wargaming, and Mini Wargamer Dave. This particular space dwarf is a pre-production 3D resin print. The production models will be highly detailed, hard PVC, just like the Veil touched from the first campaign. This thick boy is far too badass looking to remain gray, so let's color his world. Hey there, hobby friends. I'm Jared, and this is Caffeinated Miniatures. Thanks for hanging out with me today. When trying to come up with a paint scheme for this mean-looking space dwarf, I went where I often do, comics. And it wasn't very long before it suddenly hit me, Thor. I mean, there's a strong resemblance, right? With that idea in mind, and after some black primer, I started painting all of the cloth. The way my mind works, or doesn't, depending on who you ask, I sort of see the volumes better when I work from the darkest color to the brightest, from the shadow to the highlight. For the cape or cloak? I don't know, let me know what you'd call it in the comments below. Anyways, for the cloth, that meant mixing in some black to the red. This darkens and desaturates the red, but it also significantly improves the coverage. Because the idea of painting 3, 4, or more thin coats really doesn't fill me with joy. I worked back up to pure red with the sketchy, almost cross-hatch-like brushstrokes that I so often use. I've really found myself in a happy place with this style of painting. The relatively low effort yet high impact results are usually quite satisfying. If you'd like to learn more, I'll link a video in the top right corner. After mixing in a small amount of pale yellow, I felt pretty happy with the cloth and moved on to the small amount of skin on this stout dwarf. The easiest way I've found to start any Caucasian-like skin tone is to take your midtone, in this case I'm using this olive flesh from Pro Acryl, and mix in some red and black. The red adds some life to the skin, some of the blood flow visible in lighter skin tones, while the black darkens and desaturates it a bit. Because these areas were so small, I just painted them in 3 layers. The initial mix, pure olive flesh, then olive flesh with a small amount of pale yellow. If you look close enough, these layers are certainly visible, but not in any way that detracts from the model overall. Okay, on to some armor. I had a reasonable idea of what I was going to do, but I wasn't sure. So rather than risk having to paint over a large portion of the mini, I just worked on a small portion, his right leg. Starting with blue-black. This pre-mixed dark blue has some black in it, so it works great as the darkest shadow color here. After covering what would eventually be this kind of blue-gray, I started mixing in bright neutral gray and building my scratchy layers. The mixes for each layer went roughly like this: 3 parts blue-black to 1 part bright neutral gray, 50-50 mix of the two, 1 part blue to 3 parts gray. Then wrapping up the brightest points with pure bright neutral gray. And after completing that first leg, I carried on with this recipe across the rest of the blue-gray armor. I was fairly happy with this color. It was a nice blend of Thor and Space Wolves. So, with Space Wolves in mind, I started painting his glorious beard orange. I don't know why, but something about this mini reminded me of the Funko Pop Space Wolf pack leader. So he had to be a ginger. So I started with burnt orange and built up some highlights by mixing in some of the bright neutral gray that was already on the palette. Moving on to the gold trim, I once again focused on a single piece, choosing the right shoulder pauldron to test out my gold recipe, which was just 3 colors: light umber, golden brown, and pale yellow. Beginning with the light umber, I sketched in where the light wood eventually be, being sure to leave some of the area completely black, and hit every edge, even on those black areas. Then continuing with small dots and scratches, I applied golden brown inside the light umber, covering less of the surface. Then continued with pale yellow, again covering considerably less area, mostly focusing on the edges at the brightest points of light. Looking over it afterwards, I felt like I needed to crank it up to a more vibrant kind of yellow. So I diluted some yellow ink and glazed it across the surface until I was satisfied with the overall tone. Once that was looking alright, I just hit copy paste on the rest of the trim. Yeah, okay, I had to paint it, but how awesome would that be? These badass space dwarves, the Immari, are one of the factions that will be available when the campaign for Ravaged Star opens up later this year. Full disclosure, Dave gave me this model. However, there was no expectation of any form of promotion. I just like Dave and Ravaged Star, and this space dwarf is badass. In fact, Dave doesn't even know I'm making this video. If you're interested in this model or Ravaged Star, I'll link the campaign preview page down below. If you follow it before it goes live, you'll get this rad mini with your pledge. Anyways, back to some mediocre painting. I was initially stuck on how to paint this gigantic hammer. Rather than bogging myself down, I started by painting some of it gold, matching the trim. Then to change up the gray, very slightly, I simply mixed black and pale yellow, applying a few layers until I thought it looked alright. Moving on to the face wings. I mean, if Thor has helmet wings, these things are face wings. I started slapping on some pale yellow, and hated it, so I thinned down golden brown and gave it a wash. Off camera. When that was dry, I went back in with the pale yellow, highlighting the wing feathers, then finished them off with a touch of white. Now, I often say in these videos I have no idea what I'm doing. Well, this base was just further proof. At first, I slopped light umber across the base, but after I started highlighting it, I decided it was a hot mess of a dumpster fire. So I took the easy way out, painting over everything with bright neutral gray, then slopping Agrex Earthshade over top. After slapping a few highlights of a mix of light umber and pale yellow, I was prepared to call this space dwarf complete. Well, there you go, my first space dwarf, and one that I think is way cooler than any of the Leagues of Votann from GW. Now, I've got some more Ravaged Star minis, and I think they're awesome. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more Ravaged Star content. And if you're interested in Ravaged Star, make sure you hit that link in the description. As always, if you made it this far, you are an absolute legend. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more mediocre hobby content. And thanks for watching. You are awesome. And I'll see you in the next one.